And that's why I am determined to go further and faster in delivering the economic growth and the improvements in living standards that our country deserves. I started my career as an economist at the Bank of England, and I think unlike members opposite, it's not possible to turn around more than a decades of poor economic performance.
Bad news for a government which has made growth its primary mission. There's more bad news. The bank expects inflation, currently 2.5%.
Did Rachel Reeves actually work at the Bank of England for 10 years as she claims? Or was it 6 years, with one spent on a master's degree? This discrepancy might seem minor, until you realize the very institution she claims expertise from is now actively working to undermine her.
And reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people.
Senior bank officials are reportedly considering emergency economic measures that bypass the Chancellor entirely, something unheard of in modern British politics. When a financial institution loses faith this dramatically, it signals something far more serious than policy disagreement. The Bank of England has just delivered what can only be described as a devastating vote of no confidence in Rachel Reeves. Let's call this what it is: not a minor disagreement between institutions, but a former employer publicly declaring their ex-employee fundamentally unfit for the job, and the timing couldn't be more humiliating. When Britain's central bank slashes growth forecasts in half within just 3 months, we're witnessing something extraordinary. This isn't normal economic recalibration, it's an emergency flare being fired into the sky. The bank's unprecedented reduction from 1.5% to a measly 0.75% projected growth represents nothing less than panic behind closed doors at the highest levels of Britain's financial establishment.
For economic growth in 2025, from 1.5% only 3 months ago to a mere 0.75% now.
Meanwhile, Reeves continues her victory tour, painting pictures of economic stability and recovery that directly contradict the dire warnings coming from Threadneedle Street. While she speaks of steering Britain toward growth, the bank is frantically signaling that inflation will spike to over 3.7% by summer.
The growth numbers have come in higher than many expected, but I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving.
Bad news for a government which has made growth its primary mission. There's more bad news. The bank expects inflation, currently 2.5%.
One struggles to imagine a more brutal public contradiction, and the truly remarkable aspect of this situation isn't just the economic disagreement, it's that senior officials within the bank are reportedly contemplating emergency measures that would bypass the Chancellor entirely. Let that sink in. In modern British politics, this kind of constitutional workaround is virtually unheard of. It signals a crisis of confidence so severe that the traditional mechanisms of government are being questioned.
The narrative to this, that generally speaking, people are expecting less growth, higher rates, higher mortgages, higher borrowing rates, none of which is good for growth.
This betrayal cuts particularly deep when you consider how Reeves has positioned herself. She's repeatedly touted her decade of experience at the Bank of England as proof of her economic expertise. Yet the reality, she worked there for just 6 years.
I started my career as an economist at the Bank of England, and I think unlike members opposite,
with one of those years spent studying for a master's degree, this inflation of credentials might have seemed like clever political maneuvering once, but now it's become a devastating liability. The very institution she claims gave her the expertise to lead Britain's economy is actively working against her policies. It's like claiming to be a master chef based on your time at a prestigious restaurant, only to have that restaurant's head chef publicly declare your cooking inedible.
It would pretty much be bouncing around that 2.5. No, the Bank of England today says prepare yourself for inflation to hit 3.75%.
The bank's projection that inflation won't return to its target until the end of 2025 is particularly damning. While Reeves assures the public that economic stability is just around the corner, her former colleagues are essentially calling her a fantasist.
Other than a sort of post-pandemic steady increase, a period of stagnation. And also inflation is back. This is the really big news.
And that's why I am determined to go further and faster in delivering the economic growth and the improvements in living standards that our country deserves.
They're not suggesting minor adjustments to her timeline, they're rejecting it wholesale. And it's not just the bank. The business community, which initially gave Labour a cautious welcome, has begun to turn. When figures like Ryanair's CEO publicly contradict the Chancellor's timeline promises, we're witnessing a perfect storm of institutional and commercial rejection. The very people who make the economic wheels turn in Britain are standing up and saying, this doesn't add up. And perhaps most alarming is what this reveals about our political institutions. The Bank of England has traditionally maintained political neutrality, operating as a technocratic counterbalance to the more partisan Treasury. When such an institution abandons this neutrality, it suggests economic mismanagement so severe that it transcends normal political boundaries.
Chancellor Reeves will welcome the Bank of England's cut in its benchmark interest rate from 4.75% to 4.5%.
The bank isn't making a political point, it's sounding an alarm about basic competence. Sources close to the bank report that officials now view Reeves not as a partner in managing Britain's economy, but as a liability rather than a solution.
The Bank of England today says prepare yourself for inflation to hit 3.75% in about autumn next year. So
this represents more than policy disagreement. It's a complete loss of faith in her basic ability to do the job. When your former employer publicly indicates they wouldn't rehire you, let alone trust you to run the country's finances, that's not just embarrassing, it's career-ending. What makes this situation truly baffling isn't Reeves's economic approach, it's Keir Starmer's response, or rather, lack thereof, as this constitutional crisis unfolds, with one of the country's most important institutions effectively declaring no confidence in his Chancellor. Starmer maintains business as usual. This raises profoundly troubling questions about what might be happening behind closed doors.
Out of control and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do.
So we reach the heart of this political soap opera, a chancellor humiliated by her former employers and a prime minister who won't lift a finger to address it. The truly fascinating question isn't just about economic competence anymore, but what's happening behind closed doors. Despite mounting pressure and calls for accountability, Starmer is reportedly refusing to remove Reeves, raising questions about what she might know that keeps him loyal to her.
That he took office, the Prime Minister said that he wanted to restore trust to British politics with action, not words.
Westminster insiders suggest that Starmer's loyalty to Reeves may be deeply personal, with concerns that her removal could expose larger issues within the Labour leadership. This isn't just about one politician's career, it's about Britain's economic credibility on the world stage. While markets react and business confidence wavers,
It's not possible to turn around more than a decades of poor economic performance in.
I guess, Fraser, the first thing to say is no surprise at the rate cut, since the economy's flatlining.
That's exactly right.
We're left watching a bizarre political standoff where everyone seems to recognize the problem except those with the power to solve it. The Chancellor continues to cling to her position while an entire financial institution works around her. How much economic damage will occur before someone in this government acknowledges reality?